The farmhouse was silent. It was past midnight on June 5, 1944. I was lying on a cot in a French manor, a place that smelled of old wood and someone else's life. The Legrand family had lived there before us. Their curtains still hung on the windows. Their photographs were still on the walls. I was 20 years old. I had never fired a shot at another human being. And then I heard the voice of Lieutenant Firking at the door. "Hein. It's starting." 3 words. That's all he said. But in that moment, something shifted inside me, something I didn't have a name for yet. Something cold, and quiet, and final. I didn't know what was coming. None of us did. But I know now. And I have spent every day since trying to forget it. What I witnessed that morning at Omaha Beach, what I did that morning, became one of the most haunting accounts in the history of the Second World War. My name would later appear in books. In documentaries. Attached to a number so large that historians refuse to believe it. But the number never mattered to me. What mattered was the face of the first man I saw fall. What mattered was the moment, somewhere in those 9 hours of fire, when I stopped feeling like a soldier and started feeling like something else entirely. Something I still haven't forgiven myself for being. This is what it felt like to stand on the winning side of Omaha Beach. And to lose everything anyway. Before that day, I was nobody important. I grew up on a farm in a small town called Metzingen, in northern Germany. My father raised crops. I learned to work before I learned to rest. That's the kind of place it was. I was drafted in 1942. I was 18 years old and had never been further from home than the nearest market town. The army sent me to the Russian front. I never fired a shot there, either. Frostbite took me out of the fight before I got the chance. My feet turned black in the cold. They sent me to a hospital in Warsaw. Later, a stupid comment about the quality of our cook's food earned me a charge of insubordination, more time in a hospital, this time with severe tonsillitis from the punishment they gave me. By the time I recovered and was reassigned, it was December 1943. I was placed in the 352nd Infantry Division and assigned as an orderly to Lieutenant Bernhard Firking, a 32-year-old former schoolteacher who spoke fluent French and treated me like a human being. We were stationed in Normandy. In a French village. In a manor house that smelled of old wood and someone else's life. And for months, nothing happened. We watched the English Channel. We waited. We cleaned our weapons. We ate meals cooked in a kitchen that belonged to a French family who had been moved out to make room for us. Lieutenant Firking would sometimes translate the letters that the Legrand family had left behind, accidentally forgotten in a drawer. He would read them quietly and then fold them back up and put them away. He was that kind of man. I trusted him completely. That's important. Because when everything fell apart that morning, when the world became fire and noise and something I have no language for, he was the only thing I held on to. The night of June 5th was different. You could feel it. The air was different. The silence was different. The kind of silence that presses against your ears like it's trying to tell you something. We had been expecting an invasion for months. Field Marshal Rommel had drilled it into us: when the Allies come, they must be stopped within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, or the war is lost. He was certain of this. He had planned for it. He had built the Atlantic Wall, bunkers, gun emplacements, barbed wire, mines, obstacles planted in the sand to tear the bottoms out of landing craft. Our position was WN 62. Widerstandsnest 62. Resistance Nest. It sat on the northern slope of the bluffs overlooking what the Americans would later call Omaha Beach. It was the strongest of the 15 strongpoints along that stretch of coast. 2 75mm cannons. 2 50 Mantitank guns. Mortars. Machine gun nests. My MG-42, capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute, positioned 7 meters from Lieutenant Firking's observation bunker. In front of us, hundreds of meters of open sand. And beyond that, the English Channel, flat and grey and enormous. There were 14 of us at WN62. 14. Plus 27 soldiers from the 726th Grenadier Regiment nearby. 41 men. And somewhere out there in the dark, across that water, the United States Army was coming. We just didn't know how many of them there were. We didn't know yet what we were about to face. Rommel, the man who had built all of this, wasn't even there. He was on the other side of Normandy, celebrating his wife's birthday. Hitler was asleep. His staff didn't dare wake him. And I was 20 years old, lying on a cot in a French farmhouse, listening to the silence. Until Firking opened the door. Hein. It's starting. We arrived at WN62 at 12:55 in the morning. The sky was still dark. The sea was rough, rougher than normal. A storm had passed through days earlier and the channel was still unsettled. I took my position at the MG-42. Firking went to his observation post. A sergeant brought ammunition. And we waited. At first there was only sound. Engines. Distant and low and growing. Like thunder that doesn't stop. Then the naval bombardment began. The shells hit the bluffs behind us, the beach in front of us, the cliffs to our sides. The ground shook like something alive. Dust fell from the ceiling of the bunker. Men pressed their hands over their ears and it didn't help. I had been in hospitals. I had been on the Russian front without ever seeing combat. I had spent 2 years in this war and never once felt what I felt in those minutes, a kind of physical terror that starts in your stomach and moves up through your chest until it reaches your throat and sits there like a stone. But the bombardment didn't hit us. Not directly. And then it stopped. And the silence that followed was the worst thing I had ever heard. Because out of that silence came something else. Firking called to me from the observation post. His voice was calm, the way a man's voice gets calm when he is working very hard to keep it that way. Hein. Look. I looked through the slit in the bunker wall. The horizon had disappeared. In its place, ships. More ships than I had ever seen in my life. More ships than I had imagined existed, they stretched from one end of my vision to the other and beyond, so many that the line between the ocean and the sky was gone, replaced by steel and smoke and the shapes of vessels too numerous to count. One of the men next to me said something. I don't remember what. I remember that he said it very quietly, almost to himself. And I remember thinking, Rommel was right. We have 24 hours. We had better use them. At 6:30 in the morning, the first landing craft came into range. They came in waves. 10, 15 boats at a time. Each one carrying approximately 50 men. American soldiers from the 1st Infantry Division, the big red one. They had been told the Air Force had already destroyed most of our defenses. They had been told wrong. My orders were simple: wait until the troops were knee-deep in the water. Then open fire. When the ramps dropped and the first men stepped into the surf, I did what I was trained to do. I opened fire. And something happened that I was not prepared for. They kept coming. I fired. Men fell. The next wave stepped over them. I fired again. More men fell. Another wave came. The beach, the open, flat, exposed beach with nowhere to hide, filled with the dead and the living and the dying, all mixed together, and still they came. Out of the landing craft. Into the water. Through the water. Onto the sand. Every wave a new group of men, every group cut down before they reached the seawall. I was a farmer's son. I had never been in a fight. I had never hurt anyone. And now my machine gun was firing 1,200 rounds per minute, and below me Omaha Beach was turning into something I do not have words for. I have tried, many times, to find the right words. I have never found them. At some point, I cannot tell you exactly when, I switched to my rifle. My MG-42 had overheated. The barrel was burning. I grabbed the carabiner and kept firing. And that's when it happened. Through my rifle scope, I saw a single American soldier. He had made it further up the beach than most, that he was young, my age, maybe younger. He was running, not toward us, but sideways, looking for cover that didn't exist. He turned, and for a fraction of a second, I could see his face. I fired. He fell. I have thought about that moment almost every day for the rest of my life. Because in that moment something changed inside me. Not my actions, I kept firing, I kept fighting. For 9 more hours I sat at that gun and did what I had been ordered to do. But something in my mind stepped back from my body. Something detached. Something that would not reattach for a very long time. Maybe never. By noon, the Americans had breached our perimeter. Elements of the 16th Infantry Regiment had gotten behind us. The strongpoint was being attacked from the rear. By afternoon, WN-62 had fallen. Lieutenant Forgave and I retreated inland. We moved through bocage countryside, those dense, hedged fields of Normandy that swallowed soldiers whole. We were shelled. We were hunted. Men I had known died in those fields. Forgave survived that day. He died later in the war. I have never stopped thinking about him either. I survived the war. I went home to Germany. I became a farmer, like my father. I got married. I had children. I lived a quiet life in a small town, and I told no one what had happened at Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. For decades, I told no one. Because the numbers that would later appear in books and documentaries, those numbers were not statistics to me. Each one had a face. Each one had a rifle scope and a young man running sideways across an open beach looking for cover that wasn't there. I fired approximately 13,500 rounds that day. Historians debate the number of casualties. They say it's implausible. They may be right. I don't know exactly how many men I killed. But I know this: the Americans who landed at Omaha Beach that morning were not faceless. They were not an abstraction. They were 20-year-old men who had crossed an ocean to end a war they hadn't started, and they stepped off those boats into a killing ground, and they kept coming. Wave after wave. Into the fire. Onto the sand. They kept coming. I think about that every day. The courage it took to keep coming. To watch the men in front of you fall and to step forward anyway. Into the water. Onto the beach. Into everything we had. They kept coming. And eventually, inevitably, they went through us. In 2004, 60 years later, I was interviewed on television. A German documentary. They asked me how many men I thought I had killed. I said, it was definitely at least 1,000 men. Most likely more. But I do not know exactly how many. It was awful. Thinking about it makes me want to throw up. I was 80 years old. It still made me want to throw up. Because the truth about Omaha Beach, the truth that no history book fully captures, is not about tactics or troop numbers or the failures of the Allied bombardment. The truth is simpler than that. 41 German soldiers held that beach for hours against 34,000 Americans. And the Americans still won. Not because of superior numbers. 41 men against 34,000 is not a fair fight in anyone's favor. They won because of something harder to quantify. Something that I watched through the slit of a bunker wall for 9 hours and still cannot fully explain. They won because they would not stop. Every time we thought we had broken them, another wave came. Every time the beach turned into something no human being should walk across, another group of men stepped off a boat and walked across it anyway. They were afraid. I could see it, even from a distance. They were terrified. Some of them froze. Some of them fell without being shot, just fell from the weight of what they were walking into. But they kept going. I have spent the rest of my life wondering what that is. What you call that thing inside a person that makes them keep going when everything in front of them says stop. I don't know what you call it. But I know what it looked like. It looked like Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. It looked like the United States Army. And I, a 20-year-old farmer's son who had never fired a shot in anger, sat behind a machine gun and watched it, and I have never been the same since.